I am holding in my hands a collection of letters by Mark Twain. It's Letters from the Earth, edited by Bernard Dovuto. And what fascinates me about the particular work I'm holding in my hands is the fact that someone like Mark Twain is dead, and yet we still have a collection of his stuff down with us here. Centuries have passed, years have passed, and we are still reading his works, and it's a great thing to behold. And it leaves me asking the question, how many persons are writing? What are the purpose of them writing at the moment? Why are they writing? And why should we continue to write? And what have you? I'm also fascinated when I think of the fact that someone like Chinua Achebe was able to write the things he did and died the way he did at a ripe old age, and did much of laboring while he was a young man. The fact that someone like Wole Soyinka wrote the times he wrote at the particular pace he did and the type of ways he went about writing, it fascinates me also when I think of the fact that someone like Chimamanda Adichie wrote, is writing, and is at the same time also speaking. And then you see a whole lot of persons down there: Obioma Chigozie, Maria Maba, John Chinaka, and Udo de Romeo, and a whole lot of other persons down the road. A whole lot of persons are writing, and it matters that they are writing. Obina with them where, and all those who write casually also on our media spaces and different platforms. It remains a marvel for me that a thing such as literature can be collected from the memories of people and written down on papers and passed down from one generation to the next, and people get to relish and people get to sit down and are fascinated by the ideas of what these persons have written down, and these things are going to pass down from one generation to the next. When you take the works of Dike Chukwumerije and whatever means and media he has come to use to propagate the ideas of a united front, one Nigeria, and a detribalized country, you get to understand how far-reaching this can ordinarily be. If you take, for instance, his poem Okwesilieze, and the magic in that particular realm, in that particular ways of doing things, you'll be blown away by the sheer genius in his ways of thinking, the sheer way in which he ordinarily wants to see to it that the world becomes a better place, that the world continues to function and flourish the way it ordinarily has not come to live up to. And so you find him saying, "Today I saw a mysterious thing, a thing that vexed me to my very soul. I saw the black man dressed like a king, but crouching in the shadows with a begging bowl. His children were starving in fields of cassava, dying of diseases the palm kernel could cure, homeless in the land of rock and timber. Why are you here?" He said, "I am poor." When you look at these lines, there are very few lines, but then they are packed with a whole lot of meaning. What was he thinking when he was writing? This is a thing sometimes I've sat down and I've asked myself, what was Dike actually thinking when he came up to compose that particular stuff? Definitely he was thinking about his immediate environment, his life in Nigeria, his life as a youngster born into a continent that has refused to grow, be it by will of its by the fact of its own sheer resistance or by external forces. But he was born around this period, and he ordinarily wants to see how things can get better. And then he continues, "Today I saw a mysterious thing, a thing that vexed me to my very soul. Saw the black man dressed like a king, but he was lying in the dust crying at my feet. His legs were sturdy like the Iroko, his forests were rich and teeming with games, his muscles they ripple like the proud Zambezi. Told him, 'Get up,' but he said, 'I am lame.'" But how can a man with such qualities, with such resilience in his life be considered lame? How can such a man call himself a lame man? He has legs as sturdy as the Iroko. His forests were rich and teeming with games. His muscles, they ripple like the proud Zambezi. And so one begins to see the confusion in Dike's head as to why is it the case that a man with so much potential is at the same time not functioning well. He explains it in the next stanza. In the next stanza of his poem, he gets to talk about how a man can consider himself trapped, even when a man should ordinarily shouldn't be trapped. Today I saw a mysterious thing. Oh, how can I tell such a horrible story? Today I saw a mysterious thing, a wonder so great I cannot tell it. Saw the black man dressed like a king, but he was standing like the lost by the highway. He huddles in a cage that had no gate. He could see where the keys to his chains were kept. He stood on clamps, but they had no weight. Why are you here? He said, I am trapped. Today I saw a mysterious thing. Oh, how can I tell such a horrible story? Saw the black man dressed like a king, but he was sharing a sleeping mat with poverty. His poverty was a fat man with a bulge in his stomach, lying on his back beside a pot full of treasures. This reality was all he seemed to lack, that he could wake up and make his own future. And while this might probably be talking about Dike's current environment, Dike's current continent, one can share in the resilience, in the philosophy, in the ways of thinking of such a work. And so you get to see that it cuts across different edge, it cuts across different places, it cuts across different people, it cuts across different landscape and different realities. It can have meaning to you in your marriage, it can have meaning to you in your family life, in your studies, in your relationship with people. The poem goes far beyond the immediate. It goes to also talk about the current situations we're having in our world, where right in the face of evidence, we get to deny a whole lot of stuff. As such, we see the beauty in the ability to preserve materials in written form. For me to have dialogues with Dike Chukwumerije. Dike Chukwumerije is an elder brother I respect so much in the literary landscape, and I admire him and he knows I admire him, and I don't hide that. And like Chimamanda would say, I admire Dike openly, and the body of work that has come down to be his is a bedrock for a whole lot of Nigerians to look out for. Not just Nigerians, people across the world, and people in the near future also would also benefit from his work. And I believe his works would come down to be one of those timeless piece of material passed down to the next generation to bear witness as to what ordinarily has been the reality of us down here and the resilience we get to find. Fyodor Dostoevsky many years ago sat down and said, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or what the doer of this would have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who errs, who comes short again and again, who knows that there's no effort without errors and shortcoming, who actually strives to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who in the end, if he succeeds, knows the triumph of high achievement, and if he fails at least while daring greatly. So that his place shall not be with those cold and timid souls who neither know success nor defeat. While he was saying that he never had an African guy like me in mind, while he was giving this speech to soldiers and to those in preparation for war, he never knew someone like me many years down the line will come up to pick up this stuff and read. And so many years have passed. Someone like Fyodor Dostoevsky is dead, but the Citizen Republic, or the man in the arena, still continues to champion and guide people along their life path in many ways. Chinua Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart, a book that ordinarily shouldn't have been written in the first place, because many persons ordinarily would not have imagined the possibility of such an author coming to write such a book at such an age. He didn't write the book at 27, the book was published at 27, so it was written way before that time. And one begins to ask himself, what was he thinking? What was he thinking? What must have led him to ordinarily want to put this particular stuff down in written form? And I tell you, it was as a result of discontent as to how things ordinarily are, as to how things have become in our time, as to how things were also in his time. It was that level of discontent in him that saw that young Igbo boy sat down and penned down that particular story that has come down to us as a thing and a testament to the fact that we all are humans, we all have stories, we all are worthy of dignity, we all need to be acknowledged as human beings, as beings in existence, as not and not as subhumans. And so you see from the beginning of the book to its end, you see the pacification of things, and you see how things get to be told down to us, and colonialism and neo-colonialism is brought to the forefront of things, and you see how barbaric, stupid, annoying the idea of ordinarily wanting to lord it over others is. As such, you find authors coming year in, year out, referencing things fall apart, because indeed, things indeed fell apart. Indeed, those who had nothing to say had almost everything to say, while those who had things to say had no opportunity to get to say them. And so there was a continuation of publication of books and stories and narratives presented of the African as one in need of saving. And so the poem of Hugh Scott Heron would get to tell us a whole lot of stuff as to what ordinarily constituted the idea of colonialism in the first place.
I was wondering about our yesterdays and digging through the rubble. And to say the least, somebody went to a hell of a lot of trouble to make sure that when we looked things up, we wouldn't fare too well, and we would come up with totally unreliable pictures of ourselves. But I've compiled what few facts I could, such as they are, to see if we could find out a little bit of something, and this is what I got so far. First, white folks discovered Africa. They claimed it fair and square. Cecil Rhodes couldn't have been robbing nobody because, hell, there wasn't nobody there. And white folks brought all the civilization because there wasn't none around. How could the folks be civilized when wasn't nobody writing nothing down? And just to prove all of their suspicions, well, didn't take too long. They found out that there were whole tribes of people in plain sight running around with no clothes on. That's right. The men, the women, the young, and the old righteous folks covered their eyes, and no time was spent considering the environment. Hell no, this just wasn't civilized. And another piece of information they had, or at least this is what we were taught, is that unlike the civilized people of Europe, these tribal units actually fought. And yes, there was some crude implements, and yes, there was primitive art, and yes, they were masters of hunting and fishing, and courtesy came from the heart. And yes, there was love and medicine, religion, intertribal communication by drum, but no paper, no pencils, and no other utensils, and hell, these folks never even heard of a gun. And this is why the colonies came, to stabilize the land, because the dark continent had copper and gold, and the discoverers had themselves a plan. They would discover all the places with promise. You didn't need no titles and deeds. Then they would appoint people to make everything legal, to sanction the trickery and greed. And back in the jungle, when the natives got restless, they would call it guerrilla attack. And they would never describe that the folks finally got wise and decided that they would fight back. And still, we are victims of word games. Semantics is always a bitch. Places once referred to as underdeveloped are now called mineral rich. And the game goes on eternally. Unity kept just beyond reach. Egypt and Libya used to be in Africa. They've now been moved to the Middle East. There are examples galore, I assure you. But if interpreting were left up to me, I'd be sure every time folks knew this version wasn't mine, which is why it is called his story.
You get to see the idea that a whole lot of things were done to like perpetuate a people's history from the point of the negative, so that in many years to come, a particular group of people will not come to be recognized. And so one begins to ask himself, what should we do if we can have the possibility of having works like this? What should we do if we can have the possibility of saving memory over and over and over again? I was born when Maria Makiba was in the twilight of her life, but I never got to see her physically. But the literature that has come down about her life and her music and her wonderful career is a thing I admire. I never met Kenneth Kaunda, but I read his works and I'm still reading his work. I never met Thomas Sankara, but you see the sheer beauty in whatsoever is left of what he did. And it's a way to go. You see someone like Patrice Lumumba and how he was killed and the story of those in the Congos, and you come down and you're like left with sheer admiration for the written work, and also the brilliance that was his life. If you're looking at a thing like the World War, and you're looking at what has come down to us as the history we have, you need to visit Poland, and in visiting Poland, you come to see literature in buildings. You come to see the stories in people's life. You come to see the sheer evil that was around, and you get to tell yourself, never again in history should we have wars like this. Never again in history should humans become so barbaric and so stupid and so annoying and so sadistic to the point of killing people. But that is not the case. Sudan is still currently in crisis. Syria is still fighting. Old Yugoslavia is still having conflict. Ethiopia is knowing no peace. Nigeria is plagued with terrorism and insecurity. Turkey is having its crisis down there. Brazil is having its sanctions on human rights. X has just been taken down, that particular place. North Korea is still not peaceful. Taiwan is still under threat by China. A whole lot of stuff go down there, and we only get to know this stuff by written history. And we have not been able to tell ourselves that we have to stop fighting. From Faulkner to Dostoevsky to Steinbeck to Jem Coetzee to Nelson Mandela to Gandhi to Albert Einstein, to all of this, it's man's attempt to make sense of existence down here. To Karl Marx, to Nguwa Thiong'o, to Chimamanda Adichie, to Obioma Chigozie, to John Chinaka and his strides against all odds to put himself on the global market and to tell his story against all odds. You see these persons striving in resilience to ordinarily get to tell their story. What does it get to tell us? In an age where we are now so afraid to sound our gong, as Amarachi Atama will get to put it, in an age where we are so scared of saying anything, hearing anything, believing anything, holding any principles, holding anything at all, in an age where cancel culture has become a thing so strong that we almost don't know how to live again rather than to live in fear. What does people like this get to tell us? Sound your gong. Contribute your voice to the many things that have come down to be considered life. Sound your gong as it concerns you coming to be understood. Sound your gong and bring out your problems. Sound your gong and let us hear you. Sound your gong and let's understand ordinarily what you are saying. Sound your gong. Sound your gong. Sound your gong. It is very necessary. It is very important you do that. Sound your gong because nobody's going to do it for you. And if you don't voice out your opinions, you die. As much as you think you want to be a writer, as much as you think you want to be a thinker, you have to start to be a better person. You have to start to be a better thinker by starting to think. You have to do it. You cannot just want to think and then you think that's enough. You have to start thinking. You have to start doing the thinking. That is how and only how you can get your hands around whatsoever you're doing. As such, be consoled today, be motivated, be strengthened, be awakened within your soul to ordinarily come to understand that a thing like literature is a thing that has passed down to us, and it's a thing that we ordinarily need. It's a thing we ordinarily need. It's a thing that we shouldn't give up. It's a thing we shouldn't leave to the complete hands and reins of machines. It's a thing that we must build from our levels of critical thinking to our levels of ways of doing things and acting and being. It's a thing that we must comfortably tell ourselves. Indeed, we must try to function as humans. As such, you see the works of C.S. Lewis, you see the works of G.K. Chesterton, you read the works of Mariam Abba, you read the works of emerging writers, you read the works of old writers, and then you ask yourself, what has happened here? We tend to think we are the first to have the problems we have in our lives. We tend to think we are the first set of people to be experiencing depression and sadness and sorrow, or experiencing wars, and then you read the works of Ernest Hemingway. You begin to think you are the only person that is confused, having existential crisis. Then you read the works of Jean-Paul Sartre, you read the works of Albert Camus, you read the works of Dostoevsky, and you see existentialism come to its full force, and then you get to see the sheer resilience of man in the face of meaninglessness and trying to forge a meaning for himself. Because the world is like a theater with guests who neither came from the beginning of the theater and are going to leave before the theater gets to end. Similar thing also with the cinema. So they don't understand how it started. They didn't meet the show from the start. They are not also going to end the show. And in between, they are struggling and trying to figure out what ordinarily is the case here, what ordinarily happens here, what ordinarily should I do, what shouldn't I do, how should I go, how shouldn't I go. That is the reality of our life, and we mustn't give up. We mustn't resign ourselves to the fact that, you know, life is not going to make sense in the end, because nothing has proven to that particular logical conclusion that there cannot be any sense, or there cannot be senses, or there cannot be meanings drawn out of our existence, as opposed to the whole idea and the argument that humans are busy creating robots capable of pain. That is not the case. Life is not completely rosy, but at the same time, life is full of meaning. We are not machines. We shouldn't look at life that way. And so if we are looking for a whole lot of stuff down in the history of literature and what has come down to us as this, we get to see a whole lot of things. We get to see a whole lot of stuff written down in history. And like James Baldwin will get to tell us, we cannot afford despair, because we cannot tell that to our children. We cannot afford despair. We cannot afford to completely give up on ourselves. As such, we must continue writing. As such, we must continue doing things the way we ordinarily are supposed to do them. We must visit the works of Chinua Achebe. We must read the works of Dostoevsky. We must read the works of Maria Mabal, the works of J.P. Clark, the works of Ezenwa. We must read the works of Wole Soyinka. We must understand the history behind it, the works of Ken Saro-Wiwa, Chimamanda, Obioma Chigozie, a whole lot of other persons down there who are writing. We must continue to read their works over and over and over again, if we must ordinarily come to understand what is our life here, what is expected of us here. You get to see the likes of the history of someone like Hitler, and then you ask yourself, what if he was a bit tolerated and given a bit of chance, as Bishop Fulton Sheen will get to point out, as to how he ended up being kicked out of a religious house where he was ordinarily studied. What would have happened to someone like Martin Heidegger if he had ended up being a Jesuit brother, a Jesuit priest? Would he have written about the Deja in the way he did? What would have happened if someone like Chinua Achebe ended up being a medical doctor? Would we have had ordinarily the body of work such a person had? What would have happened to J.M. Coetzee if he had continued in his medical practice, as opposed to how he chose and then continued his life? What would have happened to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie if she had become a medical doctor, or at second thought a pharmacist? What would have happened to her if she didn't leave Nigeria, and if she had not traveled abroad to get to do the studies she ordinarily did, and how she ended up writing? What would have been the life of Binyavanga if he hadn't, against all odds, did what he did? And you get to ask these questions and you don't have all the answers, because in as much as we try to see these people as great figures, they also had doubt. Chimamanda had talked about her depression and how depressing it can be sometimes as a human, which is a normal thing we ordinarily should come to embrace. It's not a normal thing to constantly want to remain in depression, but at the same time, it's a thing we as humans ordinarily should want to give serious attention, more than the way we ordinarily think. We shouldn't shrug it off. We shouldn't push it aside. We shouldn't want to let it go and then just tell ourselves, I'm not depressed, I am a chosen, I am this. No. We get to see these people sad, and many persons take their life in the long run. Recently, we've come to know how Binyi Bandele died, and how he wrote Yoruba Boy Running, and It was the last work he did before he died. So sad. The same way we come to see the life of Ernest Hemingway, and I was reading him a few weeks ago, and I did a short clip on how he ended his life and how I ordinarily cannot understand that particular idea. For lots of reasons, I have been reading Ernest Hemingway in recent times and cannot help but, come to terms with the beauty of his creation, and also me thinking about the chaos that must have been his life and his obsession with war. You wouldn't blame him, because around the period he wrote his works, or the era he actually came to stand out, was a period of great existential crisis. You also see this in the works of the likes of Albert Camus and writers who wrote around this period, and the advent of psychology in the scholastic world and the likes of that. What drew my attention so much is the very fact that he snuffed out life from himself amidst the many beauties that were his creation, and I cannot help but ask myself why that was the case. But it also goes to say a whole lot as to how we get to view people around the world. People get to suffer from a whole lot of stuff. People worry about a whole lot of stuff. People are plagued with a whole lot of issues in their lives, and how they go about that sometimes is almost nobody's business, because nobody knows you more than you know yourself. It reminds me of the song Wizard Chan and Joe Boy did, Alone. At a particular line there, in Joe Boy's verse, he said, nobody, I don't know anybody past the way I know myself, so I did alone. But despite the fact that we want to, stay alone and all that, we also have to come to tell ourselves that we cannot stay alone completely. We should, as difficult as it will sound, try to talk to somebody, try to share our opinions, our ideas, and our problems with people, no matter how difficult that might come to be. It is difficult on a whole lot of fronts when we have already tried talking to someone or some people, and sometimes they seem not to understand us. Sometimes they want to tell us what to do rather than listen to us. And then we fall back and we recoil into our shells, and we just want to keep to ourselves. That might be the case. You have legit reasons to do that, but what are you going to lose if you try again? What do you do when you've done everything? You do something more. You try a bit harder. You try one more step. But it might not be that easy for a whole lot of persons. It might not be that easy for many persons, since many persons have a whole lot of issues going down their line, and psychological makeup also have not allowed us the chance to freely have full control and access to ourselves as we ordinarily want to. We don't have the complete biological, psychological, and physical control of our body and ourselves and our thinking process as we might want to think. We are restricted by our experiences, the way our body reacts at different points in time, and where we get to find ourselves. And so I understand that particular problem. I understand that there might be a problem there. There might be this difficulty in coming to terms with our reality, coming to terms with what our lives can be, what our lives can become. But it still doesn't take away the fact that we can do better. We can try a little harder. And if someone comes to you trying to confide in you and give you a level of trust and wants to discuss one or two things with you, it is necessary for you not to betray such trust by way of discussing this with third party, by way of betraying such trust, by way of not listening enough, by way of belittling their pain and belittling their sorrow. Because like we get to see in the Green Book, A tree might be rotting, about to fall, but standing elegantly and beautifully so. A man might just be about to commit suicide, but speaking clearly, boldly, and what have you. All these are the things we must put into consideration, knowing that indeed the heart bears a whole lot that we as a people cannot see, we as people cannot really have access to, and we must build such trust, and we must also allow ourselves to be agents of change and agents of solace, because indeed we live in a very, very cosmopolitan time, and we should be out there trying to see how we help ease one's life rather than make it worse. And there's this saying that goes, if you cannot help somebody, at least don't make that person's life worse. Just allow the person where you met the person, if you cannot improve the well-being of their life. This goes along with talk about how relationships have come to be viewed as people not being able to find love and people not being able to be themselves. This we've seen in business. There's a fake and pretentious idea of being polite and being kind rather than actually trying to imbibe these virtues in ourselves. There's a fake idea of business, there's a fake idea of marketing. People just want to impress people with fake life. So as you go about faking it and the other person goes about faking it, when I myself or you get to meet the real deal, those who don't want to fake it, those who really want to live it out, you cannot find them, because what? You believe everybody is fake, probably. You believe everybody is just like you, and that's the problem also. We should try as much as possible to mitigate the ways and the levels upon which we get to lie to ourselves, we get to lie to society, so that when somebody approaches us with a serious concern, they should be sure of getting an answer. Because indeed, as you go around, as you move in buses, as you move in airplanes, as you commute from one place to another, people are going through a lot, and people want to discuss with people their problems but cannot do so, and in most cases because they feel they will be ridiculed, they feel they would not be given the human agency, or they will not be accorded their human dignity and the respect of their privacy and their problems. But that's not the case, because everybody is going through something. I am either going through something, or you are coming out of something, or you're already in something. So there's this Nigerian saying that it's popular in Nigeria, not like a Nigerian saying. It's like, it's either you are going through a lot, you're coming from a lot, or you are in a lot already. We can do better. We can make people feel a bit comfortable and give them a chance to talk to us freely and as they would ordinarily want to do. It goes to also show the resilience in these people and following the urge to do something different out of the norm they have ordinarily been sown, get a regular job, do a regular life, be a regular person. You see this in the works of Charles Bukowski, and the man was a genius in his own way, without care for almost the opinions of other persons. He sounded his gong as best as he could, and then man is dead, and we're left with his works down here to think about. The likes of Plato and the works that have come down to be his, and his dialogues wouldn't have ordinarily come down to a boy like me if not for the fact that he wrote these things down and they were preserved over the years. It also goes to tell us why we shouldn't allow institutions of great learning, institutions of transmitting information to the next generation to ordinarily get to die. Because it matters who we keep as gatekeepers, if we ordinarily need gatekeepers. It matters who we come to have as those who get to censor the things we say and the things we don't say. Because indeed it matters that we ordinarily should be given agency and free speech, but free speech guided by logic, responsibility, and respect for the next person, respect for the next man. It is all I am propagating here. And so we come back to the idea of the printing press and how it has become in the 21st century. You would come to understand my fear as I talk about the gatekeepers of literature and what has become the publishing press on many fronts. There have been many beautiful writers who have not been given the chance to ordinarily present their work because of the politics and the policies that you get to find in most publishing houses. You also find this in the life of artists and their record labels, and you get to see the stringent ways deals are made and how the laws are being thwarted and twisted on many fronts and for different reasons. And you begin to ask yourself, to what end? Why are things bereft of meaning? Why are things ordinarily not given the necessary attention it was given? Because when Dostoevsky was writing, he wasn't really looking at meeting a global target. He wasn't looking at a whole lot of stuff. He was writing as it concerns his own location, as it concerns his Russia and his life in Serbia, the prison down there, and all that has come down to be his life. And so when I think about the way literature has come to be interpreted in our time, and when I think about how writing has been made a profession in our time, which it is, in relation to the stringent ways in which publishers get to look at publishing, I begin to ask myself, at what point are we ordinarily going to change the ways we get to look at this? Because the most important thing is to have our stories out there and to tell our stories truthfully also, because that is the intention of speaking, telling the truth, bearing witness. But many writers have not come to make it to the grand scheme of things, and many writers have not come to understand what writing ordinarily can do for them, because a whole lot of persons have stood in their way as it concerns allowing them and giving them a chance to write their stories and write their stories well and tell their stories also freely. So we have sensitivity readers, we have editors who get to do the whole lot of stuff. We have the almighty Arutu reviewer, the reviewer who gets to almost regularly criticize and trash the works of people written out there. We get to see ourselves being boxed within the jargon that have come down to be literature, and how we ordinarily shouldn't be doing literature. And so people die sometimes with stories not told. People die with stories never written. The great American dream of the great American literature and the great American novel to be written also is a thing that has inspired a whole lot of persons. And going back to my own big time reality, at least for the first 15 years of my life, I had lived in Nigeria before attempting to make travels out of the shores of the country. And Ghana was a first lookout for me, and a couple of other countries followed, and then crossing the Atlantic became a reality for me. And so we are here sitting across the Atlantic, but then also remembering and thinking about the continent across the other side. And so what is there to say? Writing has not really been given the necessary urgency it ordinarily should be given back home. The policies have not made it possible for people to ordinarily want to read. People are thinking of surviving first in the country. People are not thinking solely of eating. And while writing and reading has been a thing for the few, in many ways it has not been a popular thing for everybody to have been reading at every point in history. Reading and writing had been left for a few persons. But I want to believe in our times we now read more than in times past. But what can we do to make literature accessible to people? The things are very simple. Government policies ordinarily have to be welcoming. It's a long web, it's a long chain, interconnected as though a spider web. It has a lot of things to do with the country you find yourself. And so somebody who is from a place like Nigeria would find it very difficult to want to build a reading culture. Such a person doesn't come from a stable family. And even if such a person comes from a stable family, just like Passenger will say, you can only buy what you are sold. What will happen? The person would only be able to read books that are available within such a person's reach. As such, if you're not living in a place like Lagos, you might not even have the opportunity to even get to see a bookstore. If you're not living in a place like Ibadan, if you're not living in a place like Onitsha, if you're not living in a place like Port Harcourt, you might find it difficult to see books or Abuja. So that Roving Heights and a whole lot of other books that are trying to make waves are things I really get to recommend. Muta Books just recently published somebody I admire a whole lot, Michael Chiedoziem's work. It's an aftertaste of memory, and going through the work, it struck me, as a real time coming of age literature. It struck me as a book well written. It's a book I'll be talking about in the coming days, but at the moment we are talking about the great chunk and the web that ordinarily have to be done away with for reading and writing to be a thing admired by people from a place like Nigeria. People have to ordinarily get food to eat first. People have to have stable homes. People have to have a security now and into the future in terms of asset, in terms of property, in terms of livelihood, for them to ordinarily be thinking of wanting to sit down and read because, like it or not, capitalism in its good and bad ways have not come to make things easy for anybody, and the devaluation of the naira also has come to see to it that constantly many persons will continue to live in penury and poverty. As such, times for reading ordinarily will not be there. Not even for those who are well to do. Those who are well to do also have other things to get to worry about. They will have health crisis, they will have a whole lot of other things, but then at least make the opportunity and the ground open for everybody to have the same perspective, to have a level playing ground, to be given the chances they ordinarily need. So government policies also get to play a whole lot of things down here. You get to see a whole lot of things on book banning. And I tell people, when you hear a book has been banned, that's the book you should be reading. If they say this book has been banned, that's the book you want to read. That's the go-to book. That is what they want to hide away from you. You should read it for both its idiosyncrasy, as Slovak Zizek will get to say in his very, very free way of getting to express himself. And you see a whole lot of books being banned here and there in the name of censorship and all that. And it's one of the ways people try to keep people in check. But just imagine if someone like Dostoevsky was alive in our time today. I bet you he wouldn't have been taken seriously. But look at the body of work that has come down to be his. And so my love and admiration continues to go for those independent publishers who take unknown authors hand by hand and then put them on a global scale and give them a chance of writing. Han Kang was recently awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature for 2024. And a whole lot of persons have expressed the fact that to them she is obscure. Whatever that means, I don't understand, but I don't think she's obscure. A writer who won the International Booker Prize in 2016 or thereabout is not an obscure writer. The fact that you don't know somebody doesn't ordinarily mean the writer is obscure, because when you make such an allusion that a writer is obscure to you, the same way the person who won the 2023 Nobel Prize was also considered, the Norwegian author was also considered obscure. Considering the fact that he has been writing for the long period he has been writing, I begin to ask myself, what level of arrogance can somebody attribute to himself to say a writer is obscure only because he or she has not come to read such a person? It's a deduction that has no validity as it concerns the premises as well as the conclusion. It's also not very sound to get to say someone is obscure. If by way of induction somebody has said, oh, I have not read this person, my friend has not read this person, my friend has not read this person, therefore the person is obscure, it puts to question the more than possibly 4 billion people who ordinarily are active readers around the world. She wasn't just awarded that prize because she was not an obscure writer. The fact that you know only the likes of people that interest you doesn't also mean that you get to know other authors. So someone like Chinua Achebe is still considered obscure by those who ordinarily are not English speaking, so that someone like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie might still be obscure to some persons around the world. So I think it's an unnecessary categorization that an author is obscure. And a whole lot of persons have come out to say, oh, the Nobel Prize Foundation has to come out to get to tell us that they are only about to be awarding prizes to obscure writers. And I cringe when I hear things like that. But be that as it may, it goes down to also say that many persons have come to stardom and popularity by their books being banned, by them getting awards and getting recognition, which is a good thing. But no writer should ordinarily start writing from that particular place. I gave the instance of Dostoevsky as to how he was writing. He died broke. I have read a great ton of Shakespearean work. I've read the complete collection of his works, and the time it took him to write that was a necessary instrumentality as to how he ordinarily died. Legend have it that he died broke. It's expected. He cannot ordinarily have made money in the times he was writing and ordinarily produce the great chunk of work he did. Albert Camus died in the most absurd way, but he left us with a beautiful collection of things. And so a whole lot of persons are writing from the forest in the Amazon down to the south of the Americas, to Africa, to Asia, to India. A whole lot of persons have been writing, those given attention to and those not given attention, those with the hope and the prospect of getting read one day, and those who ordinarily have been destined, just like Odysseus, to continue to struggle and struggle and struggle without ordinarily making sense of their life and their writing career, and sometimes falling into despair. But like Achilles' mother would say, when Achilles was preparing to go to the war, the Trojan War, the war that turned out to become the war in Troy, he said, you can decide to sit down here and get married and have kids. And after you must have done this, you live a happy life, you live a peaceful life, and you'll be forgotten. Or you can go to the war, fight in the war, and become immortal. And as we know it in the legend, Achilles left his hometown, went to Troy, fought alongside a whole lot of other persons, Hercules and all that, and died. Be the myth or not, but till today, till tomorrow, we still see the heroism of Achilles, and we still talk about him as though he's a person that just lived his life 50 years ago. And in all of this, what have I been trying to talk about? I've been talking about the beauty of writing, the beauty of having stories documented, the beauty of owning your story, the beauty of accepting life the way it is. Chinua Achebe said, if you don't like somebody's story, write your own. If somebody has badly represented you or badly represented your culture, write your own and try to be as truthful as possible. Write your own and try to be as sincere as possible, because that is the first thing of communication. That is the first goal of speaking. The need to say the truth, the need to want to say the truth as it is. And we live in a time where truth has been a thing many persons have relegated and left to the past. With the rise of the current crop of capitalism we get to have, a whole lot of persons have come to tell themselves, truth is not a thing necessary. As such, you find people lying to themselves every day. You find people not just lying to themselves, people lying also to other persons, and they lie to themselves to the extent whereby they believe they are lie. And like Dostoevsky will get to say in one of his works, he said, you can do almost anything, but at least don't lie to yourself. Because the moment you lie to yourself, you begin to distort your levels of truth. You begin to distort your levels of judgment. And so it will come a point in your life where it will be so difficult to talk about something objectively. And in a world where anything goes, in a world where people do different things for money, in a world where people say anything, in a world where people just want to behave anyhow and tell themselves it's right and it's just and I'm free to do what I want to do, in a world where all of this is possible, though ordinarily not acceptable, why not try something else? Why not try telling the truth? Why not try living a just life? Why not try emancipating yourself? Why not try out something different? Why not leave the crowd with their lies and their sham and their numerous addictions and all that? Why not look at the fact that you're almost about to die, and you're about to die very soon, and it matters the fact that you leave something for the next generation. And that might be your call to writing, that might be your call to allowing your voice shake, but at the same time trying to say the truth. Because be you a religious person or not, it is a given fact that the truth will set you free, the truth will set me free, the truth will set all of us free. It is the truth we've not accepted that has led to us fighting the numerous wars we've been fighting. What is that truth? the truth that we can live in peace, we can live in love, we can live in happiness and harmony, is the truth that we can stop using people as objects, be it in relationships, be it in our love life, be it in our families, be it in our workplace, be it in our study environment, that we can stop using people, because people are not objects. People are humans. People are deserving of loving. People are deserving of respect. And just like the Japanese proverb we get to say, if you cannot improve somebody's life, at least don't make it worse. If you cannot better the life of somebody, please don't make the life more miserable for such a person, because in the daily events of our lives down here, we get to meet different people, we get to meet different ways of reasoning and different ways of doing things, and it matters what we get to say to them, it matters what we get to ordinarily believe. I am Biringkpa bin Nemeka. I'm a brother. See you next time.